Miyoo started out as a respectable handheld manufacturer, especially after the release of the Miyoo Mini, which is one of the best retro handhelds ever made. I still use this on a monthly basis. It's portable, it's powerful enough up to PS1, and in a superb form factor. They then created the Miyoo Flip, which was so bad that I didn't get round to reviewing my unit because the OS was broken and the hinge was bad and the build quality was pretty poor. Then they took a chance on a mini version, which is what I'm reviewing today. This is the Miyoo Mini Flip, and I really wanted this to be great, but I feel like Miyoo are still somewhat stuck in their old ways, which is really disappointing. However, this isn't all that bad in comparison to the original Flip, so I want to talk to you about it, and here's my personal opinions of the Miyoo Flip Mini. This thing is darn adorable. There's no getting around it, and it reminds me very much of the Fun Key S, except it's much bigger and features a 2.8-inch display. I have the black unit, which looks very sleek in the hand, super minimal, no bright colors, and very streamlined. The only thing that really sticks out from the shell is the shoulder buttons on the back, which unfortunately are one of the worst parts of this device. My left shoulder button on this review unit is stiff, which makes it incredibly hard to press, unlike the right one, which works perfectly fine and can be pressed easily from multiple angles. It could just be my review sample, to be honest, but I have to review as is. And they want you to press from the top down, and both work fine in that manner. But if you rest your fingers on the side of the left or even on the back slightly, the left bumper just won't press, whereas on the right, it will. Around the edges of the device, you'll find a small volume button, a USB-C port between the shoulder buttons, an SD card slot, a lanyard slot, and an on-off button with LED lights that take inspiration from the original Game Boy Advance SP. However, there is no 3.5mm headphone jack on here, and I feel like it's missing it. I would have used it if it had one. It doesn't have Bluetooth, so you can't sync up any wireless headphones, so a 3.5mm headphone jack would have been very welcomed on this itty-bitty form factor. When opened, you are greeted with the 2.8-inch IPS display that sits ever so slightly into the shell so that the buttons don't touch or damage the display. It has a very small border, a glass front, and two grips near the hinge for extra padding when closing this thing. However, I did notice that those grips actually leave some kind of residue on the case. It's nothing crazy, and I think it will only be visible on the black unit, but I just wanted to mention that because I can see it, and it does catch my eye sometimes, and it just removes from the overall sleekness of that. You can rub it off, but it will just come back eventually once you open and close it all the time. On the much thicker base, you'll find your menu button, which opens up Onion OS's menu that allows you to skip to other games quickly, open up settings, or jump back into your gaming library. The D-pad is fairly small, requires a very soft touch to press, and has tiny travel to it, which I like on a handheld of this size. Too much pressure on a D-pad in this form factor would just make it move around a lot and won't be too comfortable on your hands, so I'm glad they made something quite sensitive here in terms of the buttons. The same goes for the action buttons. These look overly large next to the small D-pad but feel like any normal sized action button. These are again light, have very little travel to them, but are of high quality and a little on the stiff side, which means they don't wobble in the shell, which I kind of like, and there's no rattling to the device apart from the shoulder buttons, so that's good to see. Then lastly, on the face, a speaker grill and a start select button, which again looks like the original Game Boy Advance SP. And I know a lot of you are concerned about the hinge, so I literally sat down with this for 30 minutes to open and close it like so. So that got me around about 1200 opens and closes. Which means if you're opening this like 6 times a day, that's pretty much, I think I worked out to be close to 6 months of use. So I've put this to the test in terms of hinge usage, and it works as should. The Miyoo Mini Flip's hinge will open without clicking or locking up to 90 degrees. Once you're at that point, a small push will lock it into place at an angle that looks more like a laptop. This is not naturally viewable when holding, so a further push will push it back to a more natural viewing angle, making it the second locking position. At these angles, the hinge is very stiff, there's no wiggle to the display, and it's nearly impossible to force this to shut by swinging it around. When I hold it with one hand, I have the natural obsession of flicking it open with one finger, just like we all did with the Game Boy Advance SP back in the day. However, my finger would always flip open and then push the display to get it to open the whole way. So I find myself constantly cleaning the display on the right hand side or the left hand side from fingerprints. It stood the test of time, but just don't push it back beyond the 180-degree angle, as that's its limit and it sits on the back of the shell. So I can imagine where most of the problems will occur is when it's open fully and someone puts a bit of pressure on there. It will have to be an unnatural amount of pressure for that to crack, as it's still quite sturdy, but it's just worth noting that it's not going to be resilient in comparison to other larger handhelds with a clamshell form factor like that. Yes, the display is small, and before some of you run to the comments and say, hey, the screen's too small, what is this, a Game Boy for ants? Yeah, we know, and the people interested in this do know that. The 2.8-inch diameter is small and is only for those that have eagle eyes or want a game like this, but that's what makes it adorable. And what's nice about it is that it's an IPS display, making it incredibly bright, perfect for outdoor gaming on the go, and because of the 750 by 560 display, you can do a little bit of upscaling to make things even more crisp. This 3x2 display will show black borders on 1x1 and 4x3 consoles, but it's very minimal. Game Boy Advance games, which is what this device wants to focus on internally and externally, uses up most of the display perfectly, making Game Boy Advance exploration incredibly fun. The display has good viewing angles, no light bleed, a glass front, and looks modern thanks to the small bezels. The only issue I have is that when you shut the display, it does not automatically put this device to sleep. The screen and console stay on, which requires you to press the on and off button once to put it to sleep. This review unit here came from Keep Retro, and they pre-installed Onion OS on it, and you can get the choice to take it off and use stock OS for a couple of bucks cheaper. So I'm reviewing this as is, which arrived with Onion OS, and I have had experience with it in the past. However, there are a few bugs, and I'm not sure if it's the device itself or Onion OS, but I'm just going to mention them anyway. Onion OS does make things a lot simpler and far more fluid, alongside some added features and organization benefits in comparison to the stock option. It's the perfect OS to pair with it, in my opinion, as this is a very pick up and play kind of device, and the Onion OS makes it quick to jump in, save, and jump out with a clean user interface. I did notice some lagging in areas, especially when switching between games or booting it out of sleep. This wasn't the end of the world, but it would often show unsettling glitching lines when loading, making me wonder if it's actually going to do what I asked or crashed. And this happens multiple times per gaming session. There's this little glitching effect which just makes me go, ooh, is that something's not right here? And then subconsciously, I'm not trusting it, and then I take it out less because I don't want this crashing if it's the only device I'm taking out for the weekend, because I'll get bored and have no retro games to play. I know, horrible. And this device also crashed on me. I was testing Nintendo DS emulation when I turned off the device, and when I turned it back on, the screen had frozen and DS emulation showed a black screen with no way of escaping back to the menus. I thought a hard reset by pressing the power button would fix it, but no, it keeps going back to the frozen part, pretty much bricking the entire device or showing a menu that can also not be controlled. I had to literally remove the SD card slot, remove the Nintendo DS emulator, the BIOS and the ROMs, put it back into the device, and then boot it again, and finally I was back into the main menu. So it could be that the Nintendo DS emulator on here just bugged it out, but a part of me is thinking that Onion OS just had a bunch of issues here between the menus and the emulator and so on. So it did brick on me. Not a full brick as in the SD card got wiped, but there was no way that I could get out of the device from the menus or using the on-off button without having to pull the SD card out and putting it into my computer. So it was like a mini brick, I guess. But that, with the weird glitching on the software, just makes it a little bit like, oh, a little bit unreliable in my eyes, and that does take points away from the overall, rating I'm giving this, unfortunately. And it doesn't upset me because I've got millions of these things to review, but Miyoo, in my opinion, was always respected a couple of years back. They were one of the big dogs making incredible, affordable handhelds, and now they're just missing over and over again. And the Mini Flip is, in my opinion, a miss when it comes to the software. They nailed the Hinge, great work, but the software and the bugs internally just ruins the device slightly. The small 2500 mAh battery can only get this thing so far, around 3 to 4 hours on a full charge, which isn't a lot, but that's all I need for a day out, in all honesty. It's that device that you bring with you if you're out of the house for a few hours. And let's cut straight to the chase here in terms of emulation. This is a device that caters to a very small handful of games due to its small display. It can emulate everything well up to and including PlayStation 1 and a little bit of Nintendo DS if you don't mind it freezing and having to do all that. So maybe not DS. PlayStation on this display is as far as you'll want to go. Text is a little small in some games and the controls are a little cramped when you want to take PlayStation 1 gaming seriously. So I found myself focusing on more casual PlayStation 1 games that are a bit of a slower pace. The same goes for the Sega Mega Drive. It can be done, but be sure to pick your games wisely. Game Boy Advance is where I spent most of my time here. Games looked incredible, ran well, and the ergonomics and controls just felt natural. So if you're looking for a mini Game Boy Advance retro handheld that looks the part, has a clamshell design, can fit in your pocket or in your sling, this is a good one. Just that shoulder button. Game Boy Color, Mega Drive, Game Gear and Neo Geo, that's also where I spent a lot of my time too. So the smaller handheld emulation focus is where I focused my time with this device. I've got a bunch of other handhelds that do other things, but it was quite nice to explore Neo Geo, Game Boy Advance, a little bit of PlayStation 1 and Game Gear on this device. The Miyoo Mini Flip is a fun, pocketable device that focuses on the niche gamer who loves portable clamshell handhelds. It feels like a Funkey XL. It's light and packs a beautiful, bright, colourful display that makes playing retro games a bunch of fun. The price is also quite reasonable too, starting at around $59, which puts it in the affordable category, making it a great gift for yourself or friends who want something that's pick up and play with an OS that is simple to use. There are areas that need improving, for example, the stiff shoulder buttons and the constant issues with the user interface and Onion OS. But there's no denying that I was seeing issues with bugs internally, glitches, and once I had to reset the SD card without the Nintendo DS ROMs and BIOS. So I haven't had to do that on a handheld for a very long time. So unfortunately, this isn't one I can recommend to a normal gamer who's just coming into the scene and wants something pocket friendly. It's one I have to recommend to someone who wants to tinker and knows how to tinker. And if something happened to Onion OS or your SD card, you know how to fix it, which isn't what I should be saying about a retro handheld that's $60. So again, I wasn't going to review this like the Mini Flip because it seems to be having similar issues. I just wish they can sort out their overall user experience because it's buggy. But I really like the design. I just think they need a little bit of work. And who knows, in a few months, maybe they'll fix it. Maybe they'll find out the issues and someone will do something to release it with a much more fluid operating system that isn't buggy. But by then, we're all on to different things. And that's just unfortunate due to the market we're in. It's fast paced and things like this need to be good straight out of the box or see you later. We're on to bigger and better things. So there you have it, a pretty quick review of the Miyoo Mini Flip today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more reviews, hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.